I'll better hope that these Starlink satellites don't cause a Kessler storm, because if they do, we are fucked. I'm Asia Harriet Hales, and this is a series I'm thinking about calling Apocalypse Now, which is significantly better than my first draft, which was 1,000 Ways to Die. A Kessler storm is basically like a 18-car pileup happening in space. We don't really talk about it much, but we have a ton of satellites orbiting the planet. We even have like 4 flying saucers up there now for some reason. And that's just the United States. Other countries have satellites up there too. So imagine it like rush hour in LA. In order to keep those satellites from crashing into each other, there are people on the ground who are basically like space air traffic controllers. And their job is to make sure that the cars, the satellites, the space junk can veer and steer around stuff and avoid colliding with other people's space junk. If that space air traffic controller lost contact with that satellite for 3 days, for 3 days, the world as we know it would end. And I'm going to tell you how in the next part, so come back. 2 or 3 Starlink satellites fall out of the sky every day, and it's not going to kill us. I'm Asia Harriet Hales, and this is Apocalypse Now, a series where I explore all the ways that our life could fundamentally change in less than a week. Not to scare you, but to prepare you to be more resilient, innovative, and hopeful. Right now, we're talking about Kessler storm. As I said, 1 or 2 satellites, 3 satellites falling out of orbit and crashing back down to Earth is not a big deal. They burn up in the atmosphere. That happens all the time. But if our magnetosphere was to continue to be impacted at progressively higher levels than these solar storms that we've been seeing currently, the satellite people who control it, like the air traffic controllers for the satellites, could lose contact with the satellites, and all it would take is for like one to crash into another for the whole system to come tumbling. This would be a crisis for us, but I just want to remind you the planet would be fine. There's more to this story, so come back for part 3. Low Earth orbit is getting hella crowded, and it would only take the equivalent of a fender bender to cause an 18-car pileup that would completely change life as we know it. I'm Asia Harriet Hales. This is Apocalypse Now. If you haven't watched the other 2 parts, go back because I'm not explaining. So in that hypothetical situation, that 18-car pileup is actually called a Kessler storm. And technically, it's just a theory because it has not happened before. But if that theory was correct, it would cause like a rotating ring of space garbage to pretty much enclose the Earth, and it would make it very difficult for us to launch any satellites at all. No satellites, no navigation, no cell phone, no news, no 911, no credit cards, no airplanes, no non-local food, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. If you want to know more, like, follow, and go to part 4. The planet recovers quickly. Unfortunately, our systems do not. I'm Asia Harriet Hales. Welcome back to part 4 of Apocalypse Now, a series where I break down worst-case scenarios, not to scare you, but to prepare you for a life not rooted in capitalist extraction. So if your Kessler storm is your 18-car pileup, the problem isn't the collision itself. The problem is the collision is locked in to Earth's orbit. And if that was to happen, it could take 10 to 50 years before we could launch new satellites and get them up there. In this scenario, credit cards would be useless, and I don't think cash would be that useful either, because you can't eat cash. Now, with countries working together, we could probably get the internet and the power back on within like 6 months. The problem is countries don't work together, especially our country that doesn't play well with others. And we could get the power back on, but without significant support. Our grid is only going to last for like another 25 years anyway. But even if power was only out for a month or 2, it would require a complete restructuring of our lives. You think social distancing was why? My stove is electric. All of our refrigerators are electric, but even if you have a gas stove, unless it was made in the 70s, it probably also has electric components like fuses and timers and stuff like that. And some of those functions could prevent you from using your oven entirely. Just the stovetop. And still, this is not the worst part. I'll tell you the worst part in the next part, I promise. The worst part would be to be stuck on this planet with billionaires. Y'all can believe what you want, but billionaires' backup plan is when this shit goes down to get off the planet. That's why we just put a billionaire in charge of NASA who wants to get off the planet. And personally, I want them to go. Bye bye. Like, y'all don't understand how much easier life would be without billionaires. It's not AI that we can't afford, it's billionaires. But that's a side note. I'm Asia Harriet Hales. We're talking Kessler storms, and you're 4 episodes back. So go watch those. I'll be here. Okay, so boom. We're talking 10 on the very, best case scenario, but probably 50 or more years for us to be able to launch anything with people on it into outer space. Many of these billionaires know they won't be here in 50 years. And they also know that their extractive practices have consequences. And again, they're banking on being able to go to outer space to avoid them consequences. A Kessler storm closes off those exits. And the second they realize they're stuck down here with us is when the real Hunger Games begin. And there's no doubt in my mind their first move, come back. If a Kessler storm happened, our government's top priority would be boots on the ground. Because even if our systems were operating at peak efficiency, we would have at least a month of Wild Wild West America. Meaning no credit cards, no stores, no ATM, no Uber Eats. But the no news thing is the most important part, because in the absence of news, the human brain always jumps to a worst case scenario, and it's like, it's gonna be like this forever. So if the government cannot control the narrative through media, then they have to control it in another way, and that would be through the National Guard and boots on the ground. I think a lot of people would just suddenly disappear and be unfindable, because I think a lot of our National Guard is not down with what's happening in this administration already. But for incels playing out their neo-Nazi fantasies, this is Disneyland. We would have national curfews at sunset. We would be provided MREs, even though that's not sustainable in the long term, because MREs are what we see people getting in disaster movies, and it creates a sense of normalcy and a feeling like the people in charge are gonna figure this shit out. When news did come back, it would only be through government-approved sources. Our poor little raggedy grid means that electricity would be rationed. Neighborhoods would be prioritized and deprioritized according to whatever standard the government uses. So light itself would become a reward for compliance.